Did you know Hispanic Heritage is celebrated in October?
That's right. And to celebrate, we're looking at Latinos who are keeping Hispanic culture alive, right here in Rochester. The first one is...
Wait a minute, not so fast. Before we introduce anyone, let's go way back in time when the first Latinos came to Rochester.
These early Latinos came mostly from the Caribbean islands of Puerto Rico,
Cuba,
and the Dominican Republic.
On March 17, 1917, the United States passed the Jones Act. This granted Puerto Rican citizens the right to be United States citizens, which made it easier for Puerto Ricans to travel to America. When World War I began, Puerto Ricans were drafted to help the United States fight. This is when the first wave of migration began. In the 1930s, 42,000 people migrated.
In 1929, the Great Depression began. Unemployment grew in the U.S. and Cuba. Also, there was a new government in Cuba run by Fulgencio Batista. Many did not like this dictator, so they left. During this time, 100,000 people immigrated to the United States. The ones who left were mostly people who could afford to leave. They wanted to start small businesses in the United States and find better schools for their children.
At the end of World War II, Operation Bootstrap was developed. The United States wanted to open factories in Puerto Rico because the labor would be cheap. Puerto Rico thought this would be a good idea because it would help Puerto Ricans get more money and have more jobs. This did not work well. The population was growing quickly. They did not have jobs for everyone. Many people left their farmland to go to work in the cities. Also, companies used much of the farmland for their businesses, so many farmers could not find work farming. This wave of migration reached its peak in the 1950s. More than 1 million Puerto Ricans migrated during this time. Migration between the U.S. and Puerto Rico continues to this day.
In the 1960s, the Dominican Republic's economy was bad. Also, Rafael Trujillo, the leader of the government, was unpopular. Dominicans who had money had the freedom to travel. These immigrants found it easy to find jobs because they had money and education. This wave of immigration continued through the 70s and the 80s and grew again in the 90s. Almost half of the Dominican Americans today arrived in the 1990s.
In 1959, Cuba was taken over by the communist leader Fidel Castro. Many people were afraid that Castro would take their wealth and send their children to other communist countries to go to school. Many sent their children to the United States to live with relatives or foster families. This was called Operation Peter Pan. Between 1965 and 1974, Castro took over 55,000 small businesses. Many barbers, street vendors, cooks, and gardeners lost their jobs and went to the United States for better opportunities. In 1978, talks between the U.S. and Cuba led to the release of political prisoners. During the Mariel boat lift, Castro sent many criminals and mentally ill to the United States. In 1990s, the United States cut off trade with Cuba. This caused Cuba to ration gas, food, and electricity. Many began to starve. Many Cubans risked their lives to come to the U.S. by building rafts and leaving. If they could get one foot on U.S. soil, they could stay. If not, they were sent back.
All that happened way before our time.
It sure did. But immigration of Latinos is still taking place today.
And it includes not only Hispanics from the Caribbean islands, but also from Mexico and Central and South America.
When people immigrate, it's important they learn the language and adapt to their culture.
Yes, but it's also important they don't lose their own culture.
That's right, Ricky. Let's look at some Hispanics who are keeping our culture alive today.
I'm here with Nidia Padilla Rodriguez, director of the Borinken Dance Theater. When and why did you start the dance theater?
Renaldo, I started Borinken Dance Theater in 1985. And the reason for that was because at the time, Garth Fagan Dance, we had performed at the Puerto Rican Festival, and he actually made an announcement that I was going to start classes in the community, and then I was approached by Hector Aganzoni, who was the director of the Puerto Rican Arts and Cultural Center of Ibero-American Action League. And when he approached me to start the classes, I started with exercise classes for adults. From exercise classes, then I started choreographing our dance. And the first dance that I choreographed was a plena, and we actually performed at RIT, and that was our first official performance.
Why did you name it Borinken?
The reason why I called it Borinken was because a lot of our young people don't know that the original name of the island of Puerto Rico was Borinken. It's the original name of the island of Puerto Rico, bestowed by the Taino Arawak.
How do you choose the dances you perform?
I choose the dances depending on how do these dances represent who we are as Puerto Ricans. For me, I always perform the traditional dances, the bomba, the plena, anything really related to our Puerto Rican culture, because I think it's very important for our young people never to lose touch of the roots of our culture. I selected dances that represent that piece of who we are as a people.
What inspires you when you choreograph the dances?
When I get inspired to choreograph a dance, it has to be something that moves my spirit. Something from within me makes me feel like I get the chills and I say, I have to do something with this. And that's how I choreograph a dance.
How does your dance theater promote Latino culture?
Borinken Dance Theater, we perform all over Rochester, outside of Rochester, and we educate people about who we are as Puerto Rican people. As you saw this evening, we performed. This was a Jewish celebration, but yet we were able to share our culture with people that don't know anything about us. And I think it's very important to be able to promote our Puerto Rican culture using the arts as a way that's non-threatening, because we are part of this society, and it's important for us to respect differences and embrace diversity.
Thank you, Ms. Padilla.
Thank you. I'm honored that you were here with me today.
And that was Ms. Nidia Padilla Rodriguez, helping to keep Latino culture alive.
Hi, my name is Tatiana, and I am here with Julio Vasquez, author of A Journey of a Puerto Rican Ibero. Mr. Vasquez, I know you were born in Puerto Rico. Could you tell us what your life was like when you lived there?
I was born at the top of a mountain called Cerro Tumbado. We call them Cerro Tumbado, in a very rustic coffee farm. Life was very hard because you were at the top of the mountain and there was no road or anything. You had to walk from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the mountain to go to school with no shoes. So we had to work all the time. Not only we had to go to school once we were old enough, which was 7 years old, we had also work in the farm. And I learned how to pick coffee at a very early age. I was about 8 years old when I started picking coffee, and I became good at it. And working in the open fields, which they call them latalas, which is basically an open field with vegetables and things like that.
You came to Rochester when you were 13. Why did you come to America? And what was the problems that you faced when you got here?
During the 50s, my father had migrated a few times to different places. One of them was here in Rochester area to work in a farm as a migrant worker. And one time he decided to come to Rochester. Why he chose Rochester is because his sister was living here already. I had all kinds of difficult problems because I was a young teenager. I didn't know a word of English. I mean, I knew a few words, but that was it. And I just was very upset that my parents brought me to Rochester. I always felt that we didn't need it to be in Rochester. So I developed a bad attitude. But the language, it made it worse. Because I just could not communicate at will as I did in Spanish. And I was the other problem was not understanding the culture. I mean, everything didn't make any sense to me. The language, the colors were, in my opinion, were ugly. This red brick was unheard of. I mean, I never saw them in Puerto Rico. I was used to bright colors, where I live at the top of the mountain, you could see the Caribbean Sea and its turquoise splendor and all the green foliage and everything. My grandchildren, I feel sometimes that I don't know them, and I wonder if they know me. So I wanted to write the book to connect them to the family and to have this connection with them. And also to introduce them to a lot of Puerto Rican culture.
What life lessons do you hope readers will take away after reading your book?
One of the lessons from the book that I hope people will get is that it doesn't matter your situation, no matter how difficult things are. If you persist, if you continue to try and work hard, study hard, you will overcome. There is nothing you cannot do in this country, and that's true. That's what I have done with the language and the culture. I still have a lot to learn. I mean, you never stop learning. Remember this, learning is a lifelong journey. I continue to study. I continue to do both languages. You read and write in both languages.
Author Julio Vasquez, another Latino keeping Hispanic culture alive.
I'm here with Sudi Brown, owner of the Spanish restaurant El Pilón Criollo. Why did you name your restaurant El Pilón Criollo?
I named the restaurant El Pilón Criollo because it reminded me in Puerto Rico when I was growing up, seeing my grandmother in the kitchen cooking. And at that time we didn't have blenders, so people would go out to the jar and pick up the spices they were going to use to cook and mash it in El Pilón, which is a pesto en a mortar, and then they would put it in the food and cook it. So that's why I named my restaurant El Pilón, because it brings back memory of seeing my mother and my grandmother cooking in the kitchen and using the pesto en a mortar.
What type of food is served?
Hispanic food. It's a combination of Puerto Rican, Dominican, and Cuban.
Why do you think it's important to have this type of restaurant in Rochester?
I think it's important to people to know what kind of food we have, to experience the flavor of it, and to know the history of our food. The new building that we are located now, it was built from the ground up. We saw the need of a Hispanic, nice place that people could come in, try their food, experience it, and leave with a good experience.
Here we are in front of all of this delicious food. Mrs. Brown, can you tell us some of the dishes?
We usually start our plates with rice. It's either you have an option of white or yellow rice. You also get the beans. Every day we have like 2 or 3 choices of verduras. Verduras are the roots. Like here we have the cassava, which is yuca. Here we have the mango, which is green plantain. It's like a mashed potato made of green plantain. Here we have the bacalao, which is the catfish, ribs, meatballs with a twist because we add our own flavor to them. We also have the baked chicken, stewed chicken, pork steak, hot mugs, which are cuajitos, and who cannot finish a plate without the roasted pork? That's one of our staples. We have a choice of empanadas, which are patties. We have beef and cheese, alcapurrias, potato balls, which are rellenos. We also have beef, chicken, and pizza, and they are all fried. They're fresh, made. Usually, we sometimes make them fresh out to for an order.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown. And this is Reynaldo with another Hispanic, keeping our culture alive. Buen provecho. This is so good.
José, 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 ¿dónde estará José? José, 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 ¿dónde estará José?
I'm here with Jose Mora, Vice Principal at Martin Luther King Jr. School 9. He's going to talk about what he's going to do to promote Latino culture.
Here are some of the drums that I made. This one here I made it for myself. It's called a quinto. It's the smallest of the set, el quinto. And I draw some Taino Indian petroglyphs in this one. Here's the first drum I made a few years ago. And it took me a long time to make it because I didn't have the tools to make them necessarily, and then little by little I got them. Here's another one, and one other example that I have. I like this one.
How do you make them?
With this one here, we start with a block of, for this kind of panderos, we start with a block of wood. It has to be a very hard wood because we're going to put a skin on top of it and then really tie it to it with these kinds of bolts. And we cut 3 concentric circles from it, which is the small one, a little bigger, and then the biggest one right here. And it can even be a lot bigger. This is as big as you want. We make this out of metals. These are rings, and the ring goes and fits right here. I had to learn many things. I had to learn how to work with wood. I had to learn how to work with wood to fit them. Also, I had to learn how to weld these little ones here. And with that one, then we put a skin, and I'm going to show you in a little bit the skin on top, and then we put this one here, just like that, and then this one on top of that one. And we catch the skin, not this one right here, right there. And then we tie them with this bolt. For the skins, we have to put the traditional drum. It has to have a goat skin, and here is one. Here's the one that gave or donated the skin for this drum right here. This leather here is where I make the leather I use to make these handles right here. And this one is buffalo skin, American buffalo, or bison leather. And this one is shoe dye. So I use many colors and paint them in different colors.
Besides making instruments, what else do you do to promote Latino culture?
With a band that I have of pleneros, that's the way we dress. We dress with a guayabera and a Panama hat to do our shows of plena music.
How do you do all this?
Yeah, the reason I do all this is because it's a big responsibility for me as a Puerto Rican to communicate part of our culture. In this case, the artisanship or the craftsmanship that it takes to make this instrument, and also to communicate, to spread the music. At one time, this music was dying. And here in Rochester, we live probably around 2,000 miles away from Puerto Rico. And many kids have been born here, and they don't know this part of the culture. So it's a big responsibility for me to, or I take it as my responsibility to make sure that they are exposed to these kinds of craft and these kinds of music.
Jose Mora, another Latino keeping our culture alive.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm here with Mr. Padron, a local poet and musician. Mr. Padron, tell us about your poems. Are they Spanish or English?
I write in both, Spanish and English. And that's what's in this book. It's an anthology of Latino poets titled What's in a Nombre? In and of itself, a Spanish and English. Want to hear a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. The poem is titled Dos Worlds, Two Mundos, because as a Latino, I have felt as if I have lived in two worlds, dos mundos. ¿Cuántos tendrán que pasar until we realize lo que está pasando? People moving to and fro, todos siempre llamándonos bro, sister. ¿Qué pasa, raza? ¿Qué pasa con mi raza? Lots of party, lots of laughter, always something happening. Pues, ¿por qué será que nuestro futuro ya preparado está without us having a say on what affects us from day to day? So with that opening, I sort of give the clue that there's a lot going on. And I do it in two languages, not in one, because that's my reality. I grew up and I speak both languages and mix them both together. So I hope that answers your question.
What are some of the things that you write about?
In this piece, as an example, I'm writing about my culture from the perspective of issues that are affecting the Latino or Latina community. I'm writing about our education. I'm writing about war and how it affects us. I'm writing about poverty and crime and the drugs in our streets. I'm also writing about the strengths of our culture. Everything Latino is not negative. Everything Latina is not bad. I'm writing about how we have a strength also that keeps us together. So I'm mixing up a lot of things, not only the languages.
How does your poetry promote Hispanic culture in our community?
Well, I would say that my poetry is Hispanic culture in our community. So promoting it by just having it published in an anthology where people are reading it all over the world, for example. I promote it by the example I set as a Latino male. I teach kindergarten. Not many Latino males teach kindergarten. I'm promoting it every day when I'm singing songs with my children, playing my drums to teach them about patterns, to teach them about syllables and words. I promote it in many different ways.
Henry Padron, a poet and teacher, keeping Hispanic culture alive.
Hi, I'm Miriam, and I'm here with Nidia Rivera, playwright and one of those founders of Latino Theater Productions. Tell us about the plays you write. Are they English, Spanish, or both?
Actually, I've written in both, but most recently I've been inspired to write in Spanglish because I see a need to satisfy both the English dominant audiences as well as the Spanish speaking audiences, for the most part because unfortunately a lot of our young people are forgetting their language, or because of us the elders not teaching our children our own language. something very important is being lost. And so I want to be a part of a group in the theater that speaks out to that need and return to our language by incorporating both.
What are some of the themes your plays deal with?
I've written also about the experience of being Latino through a play that I wrote called Sombra de Nuestros Rostros. The one called Macho's Place, I wrote Macho's Place because we don't hear about our guys. Our guys don't get the opportunity to have their voices represented in theater. And so Macho's Place was a play that took place in a barber shop in which the men gathered, and each of the men has a specific issue. Just finished actually writing Pura's Beauty, which it takes place in a beauty salon, which is like Act 2 to this Macho's Place, in which the women now respond to some of the issues that the men wrote about.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. Another Hispanic keeping our culture alive.
I'm here with Miss Leslie Rivera, a bilingual teacher at School 9, and the vice president of the Puerto Rican Festival. Ms. Rivera, how long has the Puerto Rican Festival been happening?
Well, the Puerto Rican Festival got started in 1969, so we just celebrated our 45th anniversary.
When and why did you start planning the festival?
I felt an increasing need to be a part of my community. I wanted to be able to give back and serve the Latino community, the Puerto Rican community in specific, because I'm Puerto Rican, so I wanted to be able to be a part of an organization that was giving to the community something that wasn't provided in any other place. The Puerto Rican Festival is the longest running cultural festival in the city of Rochester, so I wanted to be a part of something that was bigger and better and was giving a different perspective of what Latinos and Puerto Ricans in general were offering in the city of Rochester.
Why do you think it's important to have this kind of festival?
Well, the Puerto Rican Festival, when I started it, was just the festival. We were just here that weekend, one weekend in a whole year, bringing culture to the city of Rochester. So we provided music and food and activities for children, and different avenues for people to see the Puerto Rican culture that maybe they didn't know before. Now we've gotten to such a grander scale where we're doing a Latino film festival, we're putting together a comedy show, we're putting together a wine event, we're putting together our annual parranda, which celebrates the holiday season. So the Puerto Rican Festival is now providing our mission on our bigger scale. Our mission is to be able to celebrate culture and bring cultural awareness to the city of Rochester and to New York State, because we get people that come from all across the state to our festival. So to us, it's a way to continue to emphasize our culture and provide awareness to everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera, for keeping Hispanic culture alive in Rochester.
These are just a few Latinos in Rochester keeping our Hispanic culture alive. We know there are many, many more. Go to our school website and tell us who else is keeping Hispanic culture alive. They might be included in our next video. See you next time. Bye.